So you just got your pilot's license or you're just starting to learn how to fly, and you're thinking, can I make a career out of this? Join us on this episode of Aviation Intrigue, and we'll show you how.
This is aviation intrigue.
So, in a previous episode, we talked about people who want to learn to become a pilot for personal reasons, personal missions, recreational flying, and they get their private pilot certificate. Now, what if they are interested in a career like an airline pilot, etc.? What are the steps involved?
We get a lot of questions about that, and one of the first steps is going to be finding a school that will get you all the extra training you need.
Okay, what do you mean by all the extra training? So somebody has spent 15 grand getting a private pilot certificate. So you're telling me there's a lot more they have to do before they can fly for an airline?
There's a lot more they have to do because remember that pilot certificate that's private only lets you fly privately. You can't fly professionally. You're not able to do that with that level of certification. So you're going to have to take a few more steps if you want a career.
Yeah, and that's true because not just in the US, I think worldwide, a private pilot certificate you cannot fly for hire, for example. That means that you're flying for your own pleasure. You can fly your family and friends, but you cannot get paid for it. And therefore, you need other certification for that.
Right, you're alluding to like a commercial pilot certification, which is a different pilot certificate that goes on top or replaces your private, and that allows you to start flying for hire.
Okay, so after my private pilot certificate, then I can go on to becoming a commercial pilot.
Yes, and there's a little bit more training involved in that because most commercial pilots will need the ability to fly in bad weather, fly in clouds, low visibility. So, associated with that commercial certificate is something that we call the instrument rating. Private pilots can get this too, and it allows you to fly in the clouds, but it's almost a required rating in terms of commercial piloting unless you get a job that doesn't require flying in any weather whatsoever.
Okay, so private pilot, then go get an instrument rating and commercial certificate. And then
Right,
what?
right. We're up to two steps beyond the private pilot certificate. At that point, you can fly for hire if you, for example, if you are a single engine commercial pilot with an instrument rating, you still can't do a whole lot in terms of jobs, but there are a lot of jobs out there that requires just single engine aircraft flying around, and there are some very small charter flights that you can do with a single engine, but you're still a little bit limited in the types of airplanes you can fly.
Of course, like as flight instructors, we are commercially rated pilots, but we don't fly for airlines necessarily. But in order to become a flight instructor, you need to have the commercial pilot certificate.
Yes, and the flight instructor certificate is its own certificate. So on top of getting the private and then the instrument and then the commercial, if you'd like to teach for hire or become a flight instructor, that's a separate certificate on top of all that.
So you do not need to become a flight instructor, but I've seen people who become a flight instructor in order to build time because some of the airline requires so many hours before you can even get hired.
Yes, we talked in a previous episode about what we call the 1,500-hour rule because that is a minimum number of flight hours someone needs to start that career path into the airlines.
Okay, so after commercial certificate and instrument rating, what else?
Well, there's still a couple more steps that you might need to take. We mentioned that, okay, so far you're rated to fly single engine land airplanes, like the typical 2 or 4 seat airplanes that we trained in and fly around personally. That doesn't get you a lot of options career wise. So, one of the next steps that's very common is getting the multi engine rating. This teaches you how to fly airplanes with typically 2 engines, and that will get you a step up in terms of that first flying job.
And that could be a 2-engine propeller plane. It doesn't have to be a jet airplane.
Yes, in fact, they usually don't have you jump into jets right away from these initial certificates and ratings. So you generally start in what we call multi-engine training aircraft, which are 2-engine propeller aircraft. Some of them are still only 4 seats in size, so not much bigger than the training airplane, but it does get you that additional training and that additional rating on top of what you have so far.
Okay, so you got commercial, you got multi-engine rating, and then what?
And after that, you're actually eligible to be hired by, say, some charter operations for the aircraft that you're rated to fly, other for hire operations, as well as instructing in the aircraft that you're rated to fly. So that's a start.
Okay. Is there another certification or are you done?
You don't have to be done. Some people do stop there because they find that there are jobs available in, at, let's say, state, federal, local governments for transport, for flying small twin engine aircraft for various purposes, for firefighting. Those are the types of aircraft that you can start jobs and careers in with those ratings. But if an airline is your ultimate goal or something along those lines, you may go to the next step, and that is called an airline transport pilot certificate, which is another certificate that makes you eligible for things like airlines, cargo carriers, and those larger operators.
Okay, so it's probably important for us to distinguish that in terms of certificates, there's private pilot certificate, which is the basic, then the commercial pilot certificate, and the third one is airline transport pilot, which is ATP. So those are the three certificate levels with increasing level of complexity of aircraft that you're authorized to fly.
Yep, that's a great way to put it. And in the meantime, you're adding on ratings to whatever certificate you may currently have, such as the instrument and the multi-engine.
Perfect. So now you can get hired by an airline?
Almost there. So we talked about the 1,500-hour rule, a typical career path for someone who, let's say, graduates from a school with a multi-engine instrument and commercial ratings, very typical, will need to work towards that ATP certificate by building some time, taking extra classes, and doing additional training in order to be fully eligible for airline jobs.
I've seen pilots would team up with each other and fly in what we call as a time building flights, where they will together pool their money and go somewhere. One of them will fly one way, the other one will fly back, because both of them are trying to make sure they have X number of hours, because that is required for your next certificate or potentially for an airline job.
Definitely. There are lots of ways of getting to that 1,500-hour mark. You're right. A lot of people get creative with it. They'll pull some money, buy a cheap airplane. If you need a certain amount of multi-engine time, let's say to get hired for some jobs, they're going to buy a small twin and do that and pull their money and fly around having adventures cross country in order to build the time. And a lot of those pilots are also flight instructing on the side. So they're building hours in a couple of different ways.
And this is why we see a lot of flight instructors who have an airline career in mind, but they choose to do flight instruction because that is a really good way to build time and, by the way, get paid for it.
Definitely. And some of them will build their hours as flight instructors. That's probably one of the most common career stepping stones into an airline career. And they'll either continue instructing, because I always tell people who are becoming instructors, hey, airlines need instructors too. You can move your way up into that if you enjoy teaching, or just enjoy teaching single engine private pilot students on the side, which a lot of them do.
Yeah, I am only authorized to fly single engine land aircraft. Elaine, I believe you can fly multi engine in even light jets.
Yes, there are additional ratings you get, especially when you start in on the professional track, which I had some experience with in getting some turbine and twin engine ratings so that you could be hired to fly around in those particular types of aircraft. And that's something that's going to open you up to other career paths, because the bigger and more complex aircraft you train in, like you mentioned, the more you're eligible to do.
Yeah, and I'm halfway afraid to ask this. So we said private pilot rating takes 10, 12, $15,000. How much time is required to go through all these ratings before you even become eligible for an airline pilot?
This is really daunting for a lot of people when they say, hey, I'm interested in a career, and here you start piling on the certificates and ratings, and all they see are dollar signs piling up in the years, and how can I get to this point? That's why we talk about going to a 2-year or 4-year school. There are schools that are dedicated strictly for this career path and will take you through in the most efficient amount of time possible, all the way up to people who are interested in having a college degree on side of that. A lot of people don't know that a lot of your traditional colleges and universities have a flight school on the side if you choose that. And that may be more efficient for people because you are just immersed in that time strictly working on those ratings. And yes, it can take 2 to 4 years to get there.
Perfect. We'll get more into it in the next segments. But what you're saying is that if your goal is to become an airline pilot or fly commercially in bigger jets, the sooner you know, you can design this career path much more efficiently so you spend the least amount of time, least amount of money.
Yes, the more you know ahead of time about what you'd like to do in the end, the more use can make the more use you can make of that time that you need.
If you're training to be a career track pilot or a career pilot today, did you already know this is the path you wanted to take, or did you stumble on it? Please share your knowledge so the community can benefit from it. So, for those who are pursuing a career in aviation, you mentioned that there are 2 and 4 year college type programs.
Yes, there are numerous options all across the country, and they range from just dedicated fast track flight schools that will get you those layers of pilot training we just discussed, along with 2 and 4 year colleges and universities that offer these layers of training as well. And they all end up with the same result, and that is you're qualified to start pursuing that airline or similar career if you choose to do so.
So, if you don't need a degree or don't care about it, you could go through these accelerated pilot program where you get your private pilot instrument rating, commercial, multi rating, and all those things, and become a pilot or build up enough hours. Or you can simultaneously go through either a 2 year program or a 4 year college program, whether if you get a associate degree or a bachelor's degree. At that time, you have both a college degree and pilot ratings.
Or at the very least, a multi-engine commercial instructor certificate that does get you on that track. That's for sure. So whatever you choose, you'll end up with a very similar level of pilot training, and it's just whatever else you want on top of that.
Of course, both of these seem very distinctly different than going to your local flight school or your local independent flight instructor and say, hey, let me go get a private pilot license. Okay, now let me think about next rating. Oh, let me now think about next rating. That's probably a lengthier process and probably more expensive process.
Yes, that is an option. I went to local flight schools, actually, traveling out of state sometimes to get the commercial multi-engine rating. So it is an option. One thing people don't realize is that you have all these choices if you want that career, especially an airline career. You can go to local flight schools that have the aircraft and instructors available and be airline eligible, just like as if you went to a dedicated flight school fast track, a 2 or 4 year college, but it's really based on the experience you want, how much time you want to spend. And we often recommend if you're on a career track, get it done at a school that can keep you on that immersion track for as little time as you can spend. Because otherwise, if you do it on your own, it can take many years.
So these college programs, who are they geared towards? Who should consider that, and what may be the pros and cons of it?
Sure, definitely makes sense if you have kids of college age, if you yourself are in college age along those lines and still exploring your career options. That's probably the most traditional audience you'll have for that. And that's great because of all the different varieties and locations of schools and colleges available. And you also have a lot of non traditional students who may already have gotten college degrees or some kind of job training elsewhere or even had a career and maybe are considering flying as a second career. That is becoming really, really common because of the need for pilots in all kinds of jobs.
So if you are in one of these 2 year programs or a 4 year program, what kind of degree do you end up with?
You can actually pick whatever you like, but a lot of the pilots who go through flight training at a college or university that offers a variety of degrees will get something in the aviation field, which is great because that sets you up for all kinds of different jobs in aviation that you may not have heard about. Some specialize in the science of aeronautical engineering. That's very common. Some specialize in degrees in airport management because there are people out there who manage large airports. That's a full-time job, and you have to know a lot about what you're doing with airport infrastructures. And at the same time, you may be a pilot.
That's perfect. So you are becoming a pilot at the same time you're getting college degree or an associate degree for it. So at the end, you have a little bit of a choice.
Lots of choices, and that's where the I call it career counseling for would-be pilots or pilots, will send the message that, one, you don't have to even be a pilot to have these amazing jobs in the aviation industry. But two, if you do like to fly and you want to become a pilot, you still have a lot of choices out there because a lot of people have more than one job through their career in aviation.
Yeah, and we're going to talk in the next segment about other kind of jobs that you can do rather than flying just for an airline or something. But let's go back and talk about, is there a con, if you will, for pursuing one of these degrees? What's kind of the downside?
Sure. And we talked about goals in these last couple episodes for anyone interested in flying, is that it's really important to have a good idea of your goals at the end because of the time and money you're going to invest. So if you do decide, I definitely want some kind of career in aviation, that can get you started in figuring out, well, do I want to go to school for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, or beyond, depending on what you'd like to add into that. And so that's probably the first step because you are going to spend, again, a lot of time and a big investment going through that career track.
So if you just want to fly recreational, get a private pilot certificate, maybe add an instrument rating to it, and you're all set. That's all you need most of the time. If you want to progress through a career, you can go through one of these accelerated programs where you're going and living and you're flying basically 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 6 days a week, and you get all this training, and then you can do all the time building. Or you can go get a associate degree or a bachelor's degree in a college or a community college, or there are well-known big universities too that offer this program. So it sounds like there's plenty of choices, and there's probably pros and cons, everything lined up with your own goal.
Definitely. And it's just like shopping for any kind of school. There's going to be different styles, different prices, different timelines, different locations. By the way, a lot of people might be pleased to know that a lot of these busy flight schools that are making pilot training a year-round affair, a lot of them are located in places like Florida and Arizona. That's where you're going to find a lot of the big flight schools that take you into that career track in as little amount of time as possible because they have good weather all year. And so that's where you're going to find a lot of those big schools outside of the colleges that are located all over the country.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. There are strategic locations where you could fly a lot more than in certain other parts of the country or the world. Excellent. Do you have any tips that you have assembled that you think will be useful for people who are thinking about a career track?
So we have top 5 tips. Tip number 5, we alluded to. Try to be aware of what goals you have starting out so that you can pick the program, the pricing, and the location that work best for you because it is a huge investment in time and money to go to a flight school and get all of those certificates and ratings. Tip number 4, be aware of the diversity of careers that are out there for you. For those who go on to an airline career, that's great. They're always going to need airline pilots. But those jobs tend to be a little bit cyclical in terms of several years of cycles with the economy going up and down. So it's great to have that safety net, something else that you like to do in aviation, whether it's on the manufacturing side, on the maintenance side, on the teaching side. It helps to have something else that you like to do in aviation.
In both cases, you're going to have to do a lot of time building, and you have to make some choices based on your goals.
You're going to learn a lot as you go. So it's okay to adjust and change those goals because you may try something and find that that's not to your liking, or you decide that you want to explore other career options that you hadn't heard of halfway through your training. It happens all the time. But for those with no change in their goals, it doesn't matter. You can keep going with all those certificates and ratings. And even if you change later on, that's all going to serve you well because most professional flying jobs full-time do require at least the multi-engine commercial certificate, and the ATP will always help you out.
And our next tip number 3, has to do with what you can do outside of school.
One thing I talk to people about when they're looking at going to college, because that is a full-time job in itself, is I know time and money are tight, but you're also going to be doing fast track pilot training. There's a lot of things you will not be able to explore, a lot of things in flying you will not be able to do, let's say like flying a tailwheel aircraft or flying aerobatics for safety training, for fun, for possibly your career. If you can spend your off time from school or the summers exploring those different types of aircraft that you have access to flying, or getting some type of side flight training, like a tailwheel endorsement to let you fly those really fun vintage airplanes we've talked about, and flying cross country on nice days. That's a different kind of flying that you'll never get in a fast track college or university. And some people find that, oh, I'm going to make a career change because I'd like to fly these for a living. It's amazing what you can expose yourself to if you take the time.
Yeah, I actually know somebody who became a tailwheel pilot and flew in Alaska every summer, flying these fantastic missions to this amazing destination. And that became a passion for him.
Tip number two, and for those going into college, you'll be reminded on this from day one, is be professional from the start. People who want to be professional pilots should have that taken care of from the time they're a student pilot to the time they graduate, because it's your attitude and not so much the pilot training that may get you that next job.
There's a reason it's called a professional pilot. The word professional is part of it.
And that leads me to the number one tip is enjoy the journey. When you get into aviation, you do it because you love it. And so enjoy the ride. There'll be a lot of hard decisions to make, a lot of changes that you're going to make along the way. Even if you're on that one single traditional career track, you'll find that a lot of people are going to come up to you and say, have you thought about this? And so keep an open mind as you go. So those were our top tips. We'd like you to share your tips for people exploring the career world in aviation.
What happens when they finish their school?
There's an immense number of choices out there. Some people who are on the airline path are thinking, okay, I want to get to the 1,500 hours so I can qualify for my airline transport pilot certificate and go on there and go on to the airlines. In those first 1,500 hours, some of which you spent at your college or school, is going to be involved in having any number of jobs. A lot of people do flight instructing, flying skydivers, banner towing, any number of jobs, small charter operations. And so you're definitely not going to start in the airlines when you first get out of school.
So now you're using these intermediate career steps to both hopefully make some money, but also build the time that is required for you to end up in the bigger airline job.
Yes, and that is one track for people. There's any number of jobs that you can find out there to build the time, and some people are already in the mindset that they may not want to go to the airlines, so they'll try one of these out in hopes of maybe turning it into a career, because a lot of professional jobs, no matter what type of airplane, do require a lot of hours to start out.
I think most people that I talk to who are non-aviation people would think of it as, well, you have a private pilot, you fly for yourself, or you're an airline pilot. But there are other pilot jobs that is nothing to do with flying for airlines.
Yes, and some of these people who discover these second or third careers in aviation sometimes have already been to the airlines and decide after a time it's not for them, or they had lost that job due to, let's say, an airline merger or an economic downturn. One of the sectors that a lot of people aren't aware of, and I talked to a lot of people at Oshkosh about this, are state and federal government flying jobs. And that could be anywhere from law enforcement to personnel transport, to firefighting, to agricultural. Fish and Wildlife Service have pilots. A lot of people were amazed to hear about that. And so if you look very closely, you'll find that there are jobs in just about any type of industry, whether it's private or non-private.
We see the police helicopters out there. Who's flying that? There's a trained pilot in that police helicopter.
And a lot of aircraft you can't see. So things like military service, a lot of people do go into the service either before, during, or after their school years. And that can lead to, as we've seen, just some amazing aviation careers. And after that, they can go on to continue to serve in those roles or have their pick of jobs in the private sector.
Yeah, and that's a very good point because I think that many people enter their military career young and they go through this training through the military. So they get all their pilot certificates through the military. But when they are done with their Army or Navy or Air Force, then they come back to their civilian lives and they could go pursue any number of different flying jobs if they so choose.
Yes, traditionally, some decades ago, a lot of your airline pilots were actually retired military pilots, and they just jumped right into the major airlines flying big jets. And that is still a career path you can certainly take, but now it's become a little bit more diverse in terms of the paths people get to the airlines. But that is one thing you can certainly consider if that's in your future.
And it doesn't have to be a federal or a government job either. You can fly for a lot of private agencies, like news helicopters, right?
Yes, helicopters and rotorcraft like that, that's a great niche to get into because there's a huge demand in a small number of schools, and it takes more pilot training to get there. You can get a pilot certificate for helicopters or rotorcraft on top of everything else you have, and that's quite a specialty. We did talk to a med flight pilot who specialized in helicopters in episode 16, and that was an amazing story about how that career works.
There are also non-pilot options out there.
Lots of non pilot options. And like we talked about, you can pair this with any type of professional flying job because these days there's anything from part time flight instructors to full time airline pilots and everything in between. So if you're interested in something non flying, but yet in aviation, you can do that too. By the way, there's a huge need for things like air traffic controllers. So if you are interested in being recruited by the FAA to do that, they are still hiring. Did you know that there are only about 14,000 air traffic controllers versus hundreds of thousands of pilots? I mean, that is an elite squad of people because we talked about how that training is even harder than pilot training. But that's something that I think young people should consider doing.
Whether you pursue a pilot track or a non-pilot track, and I assume that you can also use your degree or your training from college to pursue like NTSB, like a safety investigation board. That's also a potential for you, especially if you have a technical background.
Yes, for those who choose to maybe get into a degree program alongside or after their pilot training, you can end up maybe having some jobs in aviation and then end up being recruited for something like accident investigator because they definitely need experienced people in those fields. There are lots of other jobs in those support roles. Some people end up graduating with other aeronautical degrees. So you can get into the engineering manufacturing side, you can get into the high tech or low tech for that matter, maintenance side. Did you know that there's also a huge shortage of aviation mechanics out there from anything from single engine aircraft all the way up to the jumbo jets? They need people to go back to school or go through those schools. And that's another certificate you can get, even if you're already a pilot. Talk about a great combination.
And you don't need to be a pilot to be an air traffic controller or an airplane mechanic, but it sure helps.
There's a lot of ways that the pilot experience can help you out, especially if you're looking for that other job or the next certificate, because those are all certifications, just like we talked about all the pilot ratings and certifications that you can just add on if that's something that you're interested in doing.
We should mention that if college degree is not your thing, that's great because there are these accelerated pilot programs that you can go through in a few months in a very compressed way and still become rated pilot eligible for airline and many of the other jobs. But having that degree might give you some options. So it might be right choice for some people.
It's definitely up to you in terms of your end goals. I will continue to plug the flight educator certificate as someone who counsels future flight instructors. I always tell them to keep getting that type of teaching experience, even if you do it on the side while you're an airline pilot, because you never know when somebody needs an instructor, and that will go all the way up to the jumbo jets. It's a great certificate to have and to keep up the experience.
Teaching is the best way to learn. The more I teach, the more I learn. Please share your story in the comments. We'd love to listen to those.
This is aviation, aviation intrigue.